I never thought my life would feel like one of those viral confessions you scroll past on YouTube at 2 a.m., the ones that make your stomach knot while you whisper, "No way that actually happened." But here I am, sitting in my dark living room, staring at the flickering streetlights through the blinds, and realizing that my entire marriage, the last 12 years of my life, was a lie. I'm still trying to piece together how someone I loved, someone I promised my life to, could have been living a full second life right under my nose. It's not just cheating. It's a parallel world I didn't know existed, a world that she built so meticulously, so convincingly, that I feel like I barely knew her at all. And the worst part? She never intended for me to find out. It started like every ordinary Tuesday. I'd gotten home late from work, a mix of exhaustion and that lingering dread from a brutal day at the office. The kind of day where every client email feels like a personal attack, and the drive home is just a blur of brake lights and traffic reports. When I walked through the door, I immediately noticed the faint scent of vanilla and something else, like her perfume, but sharper, almost floral and cloying. My gut twisted. She wasn't supposed to be home for another hour. I thought maybe she had left work early, but I knew she usually tells me if she does. I shrugged it off, thinking I was overreacting. Sometimes my imagination runs wild after too many hours staring at spreadsheets. The house was quieter than usual. Our apartment is in that new complex downtown, the kind with sterile hallways and thin walls. You can always hear someone's music, a TV blaring, the distant thump of a party somewhere. But this time there was nothing. I hung my jacket, tried to settle into the familiar routine, kick off my shoes, make a cup of coffee, check my emails on my phone. But something felt off. There was an energy in the apartment that didn't belong, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to notice. I found her in the kitchen. She was standing at the counter, tapping her phone with this nervous energy that I didn't recognize. Her hair was down, straightened the way she did for special nights out, not something she did on a Tuesday night at home. She looked up when I walked in and smiled. But it wasn't the smile I knew. It was cautious, almost rehearsed, the kind you use when you're hiding something. I immediately froze because I knew. I don't know why I knew. Call it instinct, call it paranoia, but something in the way she shifted her weight, the quickness of her glance at the door, it screamed guilt. "Hey," I said, my voice sounding louder than I intended in the quiet kitchen. "Hey," she replied, a little too sweetly. "You're home early." "Yeah, just wrapped up some stuff." I kept my tone neutral, forcing myself to be casual while every nerve in my body was screaming. I couldn't explain why, but I had this sudden, sharp suspicion that something was happening. Maybe it was a combination of intuition and the subtle signs I'd been ignoring for months, the little excuses, the unusual late nights, the secretive phone calls. But this Tuesday felt different. It felt like the point where the tension snapped. I watched her, trying to read her. The way her thumb hovered over the screen, the slight tightening of her jaw, the flicker in her eyes, like she was calculating whether to tell the truth or lie. I wanted to ask, to confront her, but my mind was racing too fast. I couldn't form the words. Instead, I grabbed my mug, pretending to sip coffee, feeling like an idiot because my hands were shaking. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, quickly shoved it in her pocket. My pulse spiked. Something in that move didn't make sense. She never hid her phone from me. Ever. Not even once in 12 years. That's when I started noticing all the tiny things I'd been dismissing. The way she laughed at texts that she wouldn't show me, the slight hesitancy in answering calls when I walked into a room, the sudden need for privacy that she claimed was about stress from work. Everything suddenly clicked. I didn't confront her yet. Instead, I started paying attention, watching her, following patterns. It sounds pathetic, like a low-budget thriller, but I couldn't help it. It became this obsessive thing, a desperate attempt to convince myself that my gut was wrong. Maybe she was just stressed. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was losing it. But deep down, I already knew the truth. And then I saw it,
The first undeniable proof. I found a receipt in the pocket of her jacket she had thrown over the couch. It wasn't just any receipt. It was for dinner at a restaurant I didn't recognize, a place that was definitely not in our neighborhood, and the date was last weekend. Saturday night. A night we had supposedly spent catching up with her family. I stared at that paper for what felt like hours, the ink blurring as tears threatened to fall. I wanted to throw it, burn it, ignore it, but I couldn't. I needed to see how deep this went. That weekend had been perfect, or so I thought. She was smiling, laughing at my jokes, holding my hand while we walked around the farmer's market. I remember thinking how lucky I was, how content, and now that memory felt poisoned. That entire night, her laughter, her touch, her warmth, was a performance. Everything I thought was real was just a lie. I started noticing other signs. The text she left on the bathroom counter, half deleted but still readable if you looked closely. Names I didn't recognize. Mentions of places I'd never heard her talk about. The way she sometimes fell silent in the middle of conversations, her thumb hovering over her phone like she was coordinating a secret life. The pieces fit together too neatly. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore it. I think what hurt the most wasn't the act itself. I could have handled one mistake, a lapse, a moment of weakness. What killed me was the scale of it. She wasn't just seeing someone, she was living with someone. There was an entire parallel relationship happening. Messages, dinners, probably nights I thought she was asleep next to me. She was with him. A whole life that she had carved out with someone else, and I had no idea. That's betrayal in its purest form. Not a mistake, not a slip, not something that could be forgiven and we'll work through this conversation. She had chosen to build a second existence, while I was still choosing her every day. I spent the next few days in a fog. At work, I would stare at my computer screen, seeing nothing. My mind replayed every interaction, every subtle hint I had ignored, every instinct I had brushed off. At night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile the woman I married with the stranger who had been living a second life. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined her with him, their laughter, their touches, their little private jokes. And the worst part, I could feel the anger, the hurt, and a creeping, sickening guilt for not seeing it sooner. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind for so long? Then came the moment that changed everything. I was going through our shared cloud storage, trying to convince myself I was just being paranoid, when I found a folder labeled with a name I didn't recognize. Inside, there were photos, selfies, nights out, casual selfies on couches, dinners with wine glasses clinking, all of her.
And in every single picture, there he was, always in the background, always smiling at her the way she never looked at me anymore. There were messages saved in documents, conversations so intimate, so tender, that my chest ached with disbelief. And there was a note, a typed note, on her laptop that said, "See you tonight, love. Don't tell him." I sat on the floor for hours, staring at that screen, numb. The realization hit me in waves. She had been living a full, active second relationship, not a fling, not a casual affair, a real, ongoing, emotionally invested relationship. And I, her husband, was supposed to be completely oblivious. My mind was spinning with questions I didn't even want to ask. How long had it been going on? How many nights had I slept next to her while she was somewhere else? How many times had I trusted her and been deceived? And yet, in the midst of this chaos, there was a dark clarity. I knew what I had to do. I had to confront her, but not in the way you see in movies. No yelling, no dramatic scene in the living room. I needed answers, full, honest answers. But every time I imagined it, I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on me so heavily that I couldn't breathe. How do you even begin a conversation with someone who has shattered the foundation of your life while smiling at you every morning? How do you ask the questions when you already know the answers? That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark. scrolling through messages, receipts, and photos, piecing together timelines. I created a mental map of her life that she thought I would never see. And as the first light of dawn bled through the blinds, I realized something terrifying. I had no idea who she was anymore. The woman I had loved, trusted, built a life with, she was a stranger, and the stranger had been living a life that I was never supposed to know about. I kept thinking about what this meant for me, for us. For the 12 years of my life I had invested, thinking I was building a marriage, a partnership, a shared future. All of it had been a facade. And yet, even in my devastation, I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of awe at the sheer audacity of it. She had done something so calculated, so deliberate, that part of me hated myself for being impressed, even as I hated her. I still hadn't confronted her. I hadn't told a soul. Every friend, every family member, every colleague, I carried this secret like a weight in my chest. And every day, every mundane moment, felt poisoned by the knowledge of her second life. I would catch myself imagining her in the apartment next door to ours, in a car parked 2 blocks away, laughing with him, texting him, touching him in ways I used to touch her. And every time, my stomach dropped like I was falling from a great height. It's been weeks since that Tuesday. Weeks of sleepless nights, of rehearsing confrontations, of scanning her schedule, of watching her patterns like some crazed detective in my own home. And now, as I sit here with the blinds drawn, the city outside moving on, oblivious, I realize that my life has split into 2 timelines, the one I thought I was living and the one that was happening without me, and I have to navigate both, knowing that the woman I loved is gone, or maybe she never existed at all. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. The facade had cracked too wide, and every time she smiled at me or leaned in for a kiss, it felt like a lie being pressed against my lips. I decided I had to confront her, not in the heat of anger, not like in a movie where someone slams doors and throws wine glasses, but carefully, calculated, because I needed the truth in full, raw detail. I wanted to see how deep this rabbit hole went. I didn't know if I was braver or more insane at that moment, but I knew I couldn't go on like this. I started small. I followed her routine for a week, paying attention to the little things I had once taken for granted. The way she left her phone charging in the living room while she showered, the subtle difference in how she dressed when she said she had work things, the time she disappeared for hours claiming errands or lunch with friends. I took mental notes, made timelines in my head, pieced together patterns, cross-referenced receipts I found hidden in drawers or tucked in her wallet. Everything pointed to him. Every missed dinner, every late night, every sudden enthusiasm for working late at the office or meeting a friend was him. And the more I tracked, the more I realized she had been doing this for months, maybe even years. The first real confrontation happened one night after she came home late. I had been waiting in the living room, pretending to be asleep when she came in, just watching her move through the apartment. The air was heavy with perfume and something else I couldn't place, a scent I hadn't noticed before. It was a combination of her usual vanilla and something more intimate, something that belonged to someone else. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my chest. I finally spoke. "Where have you been?" I asked, my voice steady but low. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I needed her off guard. She froze for a second, as if the question had physically struck her. Then she gave me one of those careful smiles that made my stomach twist. "Just a late work thing," she said, quick and clipped. I leaned back on the couch, studying her. I wanted her to squirm. I wanted the little cracks to appear, the tiny tells that would give me everything I needed. "You're home late a lot," I said casually. I noticed. Work thing seems to come up more than usual lately. Her eyes flicked toward the kitchen, then back at me. She sighed, ran a hand through her hair, and sat down opposite me. "It's just stressful," she said. "Work, I mean, you know how it is." I shook my head slowly. "No, I don't, not really, because this stress doesn't explain the receipts I found, the texts, the photos. You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you?" Her face paled for a fraction of a second, and I caught it, that little flash of guilt, but then she composed herself. She smiled faintly, like she was trying to charm me out of suspicion. "I don't know what you mean," she said, almost too sweetly. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't going to get the truth with a calm conversation. She was so practiced at hiding it, so good at lying on autopilot, that words alone weren't going to be enough. I needed proof, full, undeniable proof, and I had to get it without her knowing that I already knew. Over the next few days, I went deeper. I checked her social media, scrolled through messages, cross-referenced locations from her tagged photos, tracked the names in her phone that she always claimed were just friends. I even went as far as renting a cheap GPS tracker to slip in her car, something I never thought I'd do, something that made me feel like a detective in a cheap thriller, but I needed clarity. And every single piece I uncovered confirmed what I had suspected. She was living a full second life, one that paralleled mine in frightening detail. She had an apartment in another part of town,
One she claimed was a friend's project she was helping with. She had dinners, drinks, even weekend trips with him, all carefully scheduled so that I would never overlap.
There were nights when I thought she was sleeping beside me, and she was actually there, kissing him, laughing at things she never laughed about with me anymore. And when I pieced together the timeline, it became clear. This wasn't a fling. This was a fully orchestrated alternate life. I remember the first time I saw them together. Well, not in person, but through the security feed I somehow got access to for the other apartment. I watched them through the small camera and my stomach dropped in ways I can't even describe. She was smiling at him the way she used to smile at me in the early days. Warm, open, vulnerable. I could feel the betrayal seep through the screen, like electricity hitting my skin. And then he touched her shoulder casually, and she leaned into him like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I realized that I wasn't a part of that life. Not a single shred of me belonged there. I started to spiral. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every day, every hour, I was replaying moments, asking myself how I missed the signs. I remembered a lunch she claimed was with her mother that lasted 3 hours. I remembered a night she claimed went to a work event when I came home early and the apartment was suspiciously quiet. All of it, the patterns, the small lies, the subtle evasions, they all made sense now. And I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. 12 years, gone in pieces, because I had trusted the wrong person. It wasn't just about the physical betrayal. That I could have endured in some way. It was the intimacy, the emotional investment she had with him while pretending to share it with me. The texts I found weren't just flirty. They were thoughtful, caring, detailed. He knew things about her that I didn't. He made her laugh in ways I hadn't in years. And the realization that I was being replaced not by chance, but by design, was like ice in my chest. I started leaving little hints that I knew something was off. I would casually mention seeing a name pop up on a text or suggest I might have noticed her disappearing for hours. She would deflect every time, laugh it off, reassure me that I was imagining things. But I could see the tension beneath the surface. And that tension, it gave me hope. Not hope for fixing us, but hope for the confrontation I knew I needed. The day I finally confronted her in full, I had prepared myself for every possible response. I had notes, timelines, messages printed out, photos labeled with dates. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't pleading. I wanted a conversation that stripped away all pretenses. A conversation where nothing could hide behind smiles or excuses. I had to see it all laid bare. I found her in the kitchen again, just like that first night I noticed something was off. I set the folder of evidence on the counter. She glanced at it, and I could see her face change. Confusion at first, then a flicker of panic, and finally the mask of calm she was so practiced at wearing. "I know everything," I said softly, almost monotone. "The apartment, the dinners, the texts, the photos. I have it all." She froze. I could see her calculating, weighing options, trying to find an angle. Then she laughed, quietly, nervously, like she was trying to dismiss it, to shrink it down so it wouldn't matter. "What are you talking about?" she said. I slid the first photo across the counter. Her smile faltered. I slid the next one, and the next, and then the folder of messages. Her hands shook slightly as she reached toward them, but she didn't stop me. I watched her in that moment, the woman I thought I knew, the person I had married, unraveling before me. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't speak. I wanted her to see that there was no escape, no lie that could cover this up. And then she admitted it, slowly, carefully, as if she were revealing a secret she had been protecting for years. She told me about him, about the dinners, the trips, the nights she had spent with him. She told me how she fell for him, how it had started casually, how it had grown. Every word she spoke felt like a knife, slicing through the foundation of the life I had built. I sat there, numb. Part of me wanted to scream, part of me wanted to collapse, and part of me couldn't believe I was hearing this from the woman I had loved more than anything. And yet, even in that moment, I couldn't look away. I couldn't stop listening, because I had to know. I had to understand the extent of the betrayal. When she finished, there was silence, thick, suffocating silence. I felt like I was drowning in it. And then I realized something. The person I loved, the person I trusted,
The person I had given everything to didn't exist anymore, or maybe she never had. And I had to decide what to do next, but the truth was already clear. Nothing would ever be the same. After that night, the apartment felt like a mausoleum. Everything was the same, the couch, the kitchen, the blinds, but the life inside it was gone. I kept thinking about how she could carry on this double existence with such precision, how she could smile at me, brush past me, laugh at my jokes, all while planning nights, weekends, and trips with him. It wasn't just betrayal, it was orchestration, and I hated that part of me, the part that was still analyzing, still tracking, still obsessively replaying every detail, because I knew I was addicted to knowing, addicted to the story of how she had deceived me so completely. The mornings became the hardest. I'd wake up alone, even when she was there. I'd watch her move through the apartment, pretending to be normal, and I felt like a ghost. I remember one morning distinctly. I was sitting at the breakfast bar, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I didn't want, staring at the window at the street below. She walked in, hair tousled, hairdryer abandoned on the counter, and she smiled at me like nothing had happened. I wanted to scream, I wanted to throw something, I wanted to shake her until she told me everything. But instead I just sat there, silent, watching her, counting the seconds until I could go to work and escape. Work became both a refuge and a prison. On one hand, the office gave me structure, gave me a reason to get out of bed. On the other, it was impossible to focus. Every email, every phone call, every client question bounced off my skull and ricocheted straight to the folder of her lies, to the photos, the texts, the receipts I kept revisiting like a ritual. And then there was the creeping paranoia. I couldn't shake the image of her sneaking messages on her phone, leaving for lunch only to meet him, seeing their apartment as vividly as I had in my surveillance. It was like living in two realities, one where I had a wife and one where she was gone. I tried to confront her again, not in anger this time, but in desperation. I needed answers, I needed details. How could she do this for so long? How could she live two lives and not crumble under the weight of it? She leaned against the counter that evening, her fingers brushing the edge of the sink as she avoided my gaze. I could see it, the calculation, the tension. She had a story ready, of course, a version where she minimized everything, where she tried to make it sound like her connection with him was emotional but didn't threaten the life we had. It just happened, she said finally. I didn't plan for it to get this big. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. Not planned, I echoed. You've been careful.
You've been meticulous. You've built a life without me noticing. That's not something that happens by accident. She bit her lip, glanced at the floor, and for a split second, I saw her vulnerability, the part of her that still existed beneath the lies. I don't know why I did it. I guess I wanted something I didn't feel with you anymore. Something alive. I felt my stomach twist. Alive? She had been alive while I slept beside her every night, thinking we were together. And I, what? Dead? I felt the betrayal not just in my chest, but coursing through my entire body, making it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to even exist in that apartment that had been our home. After that conversation, I started keeping a journal. Not to write about her, not really, but to try and process the dissonance in my own mind. I needed to anchor myself because everything else had spun out of control. I wrote about the receipts, the trips, the subtle evasions. I wrote about the laughter I remembered from the early days of our marriage, and how I realized now that laughter had died long before I found out about him. I wrote about my anger, my disbelief, my shame at not seeing the signs. And in writing it all down, I began to see patterns. Patterns that made me more certain that she had been living this second life for a very long time. Then came the night I accidentally walked in on her texting him. She didn't see me, and I froze, watching the screen light up with messages that made my skin crawl. She was laughing at something he wrote, fingers flying over the keyboard, words dripping with intimacy I had never shared with her. I realized then that I had no control, no claim over her attention, her laughter, her private thoughts. And the realization hit harder than anything before. This wasn't about attraction or a mistake. This was about devotion. He had what I had lost, what I never even realized I had lost until that moment. I started obsessing over small details of her life, the ones I used to ignore. The way she left a coffee cup on the nightstand. The way she folded her clothes. The way she hummed while showering. Every movement became a clue, a puzzle piece I didn't want to see but couldn't look away from. I would catch her glances, the slight twitches, the moments when her smile faltered. Every little tell confirmed what I already knew. She was maintaining two separate existences, and I had been just one of them. Sleep became impossible. Every night I lay awake, imagining him in the bed she shared with me for years, imagining his hands, his voice, the inside jokes, the late-night texts. And every morning, she'd greet me like nothing had changed. It was infuriating, devastating, and humiliating all at once. I hated her. I hated him. I hated myself for letting it happen, and I hated that a part of me couldn't stop watching, couldn't stop cataloging every lie, every nuance, every hidden smile. There was a turning point, though, a moment that changed everything. She had been planning a weekend trip, one of those girls' weekends she insisted were for bonding with friends. I had a hunch, a gut feeling, and I decided to follow her, not like a stalker, but to confirm what I already suspected. I parked a few blocks away, heart hammering, waiting, and then I saw him. The first time I saw him in person, the full, undeniable truth hit me like a punch to the chest. They met outside a cafe. She smiled like I had never seen in years, and they kissed. A quick, careless kiss, but enough. Enough to confirm everything I had feared. Enough to realize that 12 years of my life had been lived alongside a ghost. I didn't approach. I didn't scream. I didn't cry, though I wanted to. I just watched. And in that moment, I knew something I hadn't been able to admit. I didn't want to confront her with anger. I wanted to understand the person I thought I knew. I wanted her to admit to everything, lay it bare, and maybe, just maybe, let me see the truth without lies. But there was no reconciliation in my heart anymore. That part of me had died the moment I realized she could love someone else completely, while letting me sleep in the same bed. The weeks after that became a blur of planning, strategizing, and quiet observation. I needed to know everything, to map her double life in complete detail. And the deeper I went, the more I realized the scale of what she had built. Trips, dinners, texts, subtle gifts, even shared memories that I never knew existed. She had invested in him emotionally, mentally, physically, and every single investment had been hidden from me. Every lie was a carefully constructed act in a play that I was only now allowed to watch from the audience. One night, I confronted her again. I had printed everything. Receipts, messages, photos, timelines. I laid them on the table like evidence in a court case. I looked her in the eyes and said, "This is everything. Every step you took. Every lie you told. Tell me, why? Why him? Why this?" She looked down, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know. I didn't plan it. I needed to feel alive. I thought I could have both worlds, that it wouldn't hurt anyone." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You didn't think. You knew. You just assumed I'd never find out." And in that moment, I realized something. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had rewritten reality, carved out a new life in secret, and I had been blind to it for so long. And as much as I wanted to be angry, as much as I wanted to feel justified in hating her, a part of me, terrifyingly, humiliatingly, admired the audacity, the sheer boldness of it. By now the apartment felt smaller, the walls closing in. I couldn't sleep there anymore, couldn't watch her move through the rooms with that casual grace. I felt like a stranger in my own life, like a ghost observing someone else's story. And yet, even with all this, I couldn't leave.
Not yet. Not until I had seen the full truth. Until I had understood the extent of her betrayal. Until I had cataloged everything in my mind and in my journal. So I stayed, watching, waiting, learning. And every day, the weight of her lies, her parallel life, her audacious ability to live two realities at once, pressed down on me like gravity. I didn't know how much longer I could endure it, or if I even wanted to. All I knew was that I had reached a point of no return, and the next steps, the confrontations, the revelations, the ultimate truths, were coming. I remember the night it all collapsed. I couldn't pretend anymore. Couldn't stay trapped in the apartment watching her move between two lives, smiling at me like nothing had happened. I had made a decision that I couldn't take back. I needed the final confrontation, the full truth, everything on the table. I wanted her to see me fully awake, fully aware of the life she had built in secret. And I wanted to know exactly why. Not the watered-down version, not the rehearsed story, not the excuse-filled narrative she'd been feeding me for months. I needed the raw truth. I waited until she got home from one of her work dinners, one of the many I had been tracking. The apartment was dark, quiet, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I had the folder in my hands, all of her messages, receipts, photos, and a list of dates and events I had painstakingly mapped. I sat on the couch, waiting, my stomach twisting with anticipation and fear.
When she walked in, she froze the moment she saw the folder. Her eyes widened, her lips parted slightly, and for the first time in months, she looked vulnerable, real. "I know everything," I said, my voice steady but low, like the calm before a storm. "I have seen the texts, the photos, the trips, the dinners. I know about him, about the apartment, about everything you've been hiding. I've tracked it all. Do you want to explain why?" She looked away, biting her lip. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly. Then she spoke, quietly, almost brokenly. I don't know how it happened. I didn't plan it, not really. It started as something small, and then I just couldn't stop. I wanted to feel alive again. I wanted excitement, attention, someone to care about me the way I used to feel you cared. I never meant for it to get this far. I never thought you'd find out." Her words hit me like a hammer. I wanted to scream, to throw the folder across the room, to shake her until she felt the weight of every lie she had told. But instead, I felt this hollow emptiness, a quiet despair that washed over me like ice water. For 12 years, I had trusted her completely. I had built my life around her, invested everything in this marriage, and she had been living a second life all along. And the thing that cut the deepest wasn't just that she had betrayed me. It was how easily she had done it, how effortlessly she had hidden it, and how entirely I had missed it. I forced myself to sit down, my hands gripping the folder so tightly my knuckles ached. "Do you even realize what you've done?" I asked. "Do you know how much of my life this has stolen? Every laugh, every touch, every moment I thought we shared, it's all been a performance." She looked at me, tears brimming in her eyes, and whispered, "I didn't want to hurt you. I never wanted you to find out. I didn't know how to stop." And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. There were no excuses left. There were no ways to fix this, no apologies that could make up for years of deceit, no way to go back to the person I thought I was married to. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and the person I loved, the person I thought I knew, was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. I left that night, not in a dramatic, shouting, door-slamming way, but quietly, methodically. I packed a bag with what I needed and walked out into the cold city streets, leaving behind the apartment, the life, the lies. Every step I took felt surreal, like I was moving through someone else's story. I didn't know where I was going only that I couldn't stay there, couldn't keep breathing the same air as someone who had lived a full life in secret while I slept beside her. The days after were a blur of empty hotel rooms, long drives, and staring out at neon lights in the rain. I felt hollow, like the core of my life had been ripped out, and every familiar street, every corner of the city reminded me of her absence, her betrayal, her duplicity. I didn't call her, I didn't text her, I just existed, walking through life with a sense of weight I had never known before. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. Every time a familiar song played, I felt my chest tighten. It was like mourning someone who was still alive, someone who had been alive in another life all along. Weeks passed. I tried to reclaim a sense of normalcy, but everything was different. I couldn't trust, couldn't laugh fully, couldn't let myself believe in love without hesitation. And yet, amidst the devastation, there was a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I had survived it. I had seen the full truth, faced it, and chosen to walk away instead of losing myself completely. I realized that her betrayal, as massive and incomprehensible as it was, didn't define me. I wasn't the naive, blind man who had missed the signs for 12 years. I was someone who had endured, who had stared into the abyss of deceit and chosen to live anyway. Eventually, I sold the apartment. Every object, every trace of the life I had shared with her became a memory I couldn't face daily. I moved to a new part of the city, started a new routine, slowly began to rebuild my life on my terms. I refused to date for months, years really, because I couldn't trust my heart again, and I needed to heal without anyone else's presence complicating the process. But in that distance, in that space apart, I found a strange sense of freedom. The betrayal had stolen a lot from me, yes, but it had also awakened a part of me I hadn't known existed, the ability to survive emotional devastation and still stand. I don't know if she's still with him. I don't care. I stopped checking months ago. What I know is that I can walk down the streets of this city, go to bars, meet people, exist in spaces where I once felt trapped by her lies, and finally breathe. The hurt still lingers, of course. It's a scar I'll carry for the rest of my life. But that scar reminds me of something essential. I was deceived, yes, but I didn't let the deception define me. I walked away, and in walking away, I reclaimed a piece of myself I didn't know was lost. The last time I think about her, I imagine her laughing at something he says, completely unaware that the man she once betrayed is now free. And I don't hate her anymore, not really. I only feel the weight of what was, the lessons that came too late, and the knowledge that I survived something that could have destroyed me entirely. Life doesn't pause for betrayal. It doesn't care about lies or deception, or the private worlds people build behind closed doors, and I learned that the hard way. But the one thing I have now, the one thing she can never touch, is my autonomy, my choices, my ability to wake up in the morning, look out at the city, and know that I am no longer living in someone else's shadow. I am no longer the man who believed in a lie. I am simply me, and that, after everything, is enough.